Scott Steiner says, when asked about AEW, he says, it's great for another place for the guys to work, AEW. Competition's always good for, I'm trying to do like where's he from? A Minnesotan accent. Competition's always good for the business. But there's no doubt that WWE is hot right now. They got the fan interest. That's what's most important. My freaks, my peaks, and my the thing is, you can't just have matches. Nobody gives a shit if they're just matches with no storyline. You're throwing two guys together. So that's what Scott Steiner's got to say. Now, a bunch, of course, the IWC, there's a bunch of people like, I'm loving the AEW stands, but spoken from someone that clearly doesn't watch the AEW product. Why is there still a narrative that AEW don't have stories? Because they don't, bro. Like, stories with no substance aren't stories. They're just a series of events happening. Okay? And stories are just a series of events, right? But they are more than that as well. So if there's no substance, it just doesn't matter. If you don't know why people are doing things, there's no motive, then it does not matter. So, yes, there are stories in AEW, but it's not really stories. It's just mostly things happening. But there are some good, Tony Storm, like we see up here. But it's not even like Tony Storm and Mina and all of that is like, oh, it's this great, compelling story. It's just really interesting characters doing kind of funny. And then they're having solid matches. And it's like larger than life. And it's HLA. Yeah, it's hot women doing things, So it works. It works on these different, it's not like it's a bloodline level story being told, or it's one of these great stories, right, in the annals of wrestling history, but that is a solid story, as far as Swerve, who's coming out right now, him and Danielson and Hangman, all that nonsensical, the Owen Hart, why did that tie into things? None of it makes sense. So Goldberg, though, had something so that's Scott Steiner's opinion, but Goldberg also had something to say. Speaking of Giga Chad Van Vliet, here's the post. He acknowledged this. We can look at this. Giga Chad Van Vliet with another insane W, and then GCVV with a handshake. Let's go, Giga Chad Van Vliet. There he is, the almighty. And here's what Goldberg has to say about Tony Khan as well.
You'd said before you've had many conversations with Tony Khan. How come those didn't lead to anything?
I think we have a different perspective on it. I think. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to really pass judgment on their production because I don't watch it. I see clips of it. And it's hard to give a rational breakdown of how they are if I don't really watch it. So I don't really.
That's an indictment right there.
No, he reminds me of Dixie Carter.
Is that a good thing?
But a male version. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but he reminds me of that scenario, and it's just a different feel. It's just different.
Oh, come on now. Dixie Carter's great. Don't take shots like that. Just because her dad gave her money and my dad gave me money doesn't mean that we're not great.
Close to making a deal with them, or were these just conversations?
No, I don't think I was ever close to making a deal with him. I think it was much more a realistic transition when Sting was involved, because that's why I reached out to Sting, because I wanted to be a part. I thought he and I could do a farewell thing at some point together, but it wasn't about me. It was about Sting. And I didn't want, I could never overshadow anything.
See, that was planned. I was like, damn, dude, what if Goldberg shows up at last Wembley for the Sting match? I was like, that's the only way you can do it. And I don't know. That was discussed, but I don't know. It never came to fruition. So we were right, PWT Universe, on that Fantasy Mark booking.
He does. But I don't want to convolute the water. Right. It would have been a nice crescendo, but it wasn't about me.
Yeah, so there you go, man. He basically called him Dixie Carter. So, Chris Connor, your thoughts on, Scott Steiner and Goldberg, also just basically confirming what everybody thinks about Tony Khan. Your thoughts on these veterans, these legends, and then these IWC marks going at these legends, man. Screw those guys. Sorry, your thoughts, Chris.
I mean, are they wrong? I mean, that's what we've been saying that for years. I mean, that's what Tony is. He's Dixie Carter 2.0, or I've called him worse. I've basically said he is Herb Abrams, except with more money. He doesn't know what he's doing. The show has gone down for the last 5 years. He's everybody's, best buddy. That's what he is. I don't know what else we can tell you. It's gotten to the point now where everybody has admitted that, even his critics, his friends. That's what everybody says. Oh, he's a nice guy.
So Sean Ross Sapp responds to Fightful's report about Scott Steiner on AEW. You can't just have matches. And Sean Ross Sapp says, I don't think anyone making this criticism actually watches AEW at this point or has for a long time. You can say you don't like the stories because entertainment is subjective, true. But to say they don't exist isn't genuine. Right, but stories exist in bad TV shows that get canceled too. It doesn't mean that they're stories of substance. I guess we need to break it down for these. When we say no story, we mean none in comparison. We all share the commonality of language, and these love playing semantics. Okay,
there are no stories. Let's face it right now. AEW right now has a 6-man tag match between Rush,
Ishii, Toros,
versus Cassidy, one of the Briscoes, and what's the story between all these guys?
They're literally that 6-man tag. Well, I guess so. I guess Briscoe, Cassidy, and other buddy are called the Conglomerate. Ishii. I guess they're a faction or something. I don't know, bro. I don't know. This. I love Russian, but yeah.
I mean, this isn't you look on Raw. It's for Judgment Day versus Uso, and then it's just been carrying on. It's Finn Balor, against Gunther, which was carrying on with Damian Priest and Gunther, and there was, you saw Sami Zayn, with Dominic Mysterio, with the ever presence of Braun Breaker. I mean, there was a storyline within this. There was, everything was connected. This wasn't just random matches we're throwing in there. That is AEW, which they just throw crap in there. And there it's it's just 6-man tag matches for the sake of 6-man tag matches.
And so I quote tweet neckbeards, and this isn't me singling out Sap either, guys. This, it's just I had to go off on this. And so I just quote tweet this and I say the problem is these people don't understand what makes a good story. Now, for me, I don't want anyone in wrestling to take this personally, coming from your boy Phil Marks, because I also work in movies and video games and comic books and all that, and TV and stuff like that. Okay. And I am talking in that world too. It's these journalists, these quote unquote, these activist journalists. I've talked about it on a show before. They don't make it writing or they're not in the wrestling business, so they're in wrestling business adjacent, where they think they're not good enough to write actual creative, so they just make up, or they do news and give their little takes or whatever. You know what I mean? And so this happens in entertainment as well. Insiders, people from the set of who know Ryan Reynolds, an unnamed source says Kim Kardashian farts into cups. It's the same exact thing. It's just pro wrestling on this side of it. So wrestling people freak out when I say this sort of, but this is something that affects me, your boy Phil, out in and outside of wrestling as well. This is just a blanket general statement. This isn't me singling anyone out. And I just wrote, the problem is these people don't understand what makes a good story. Yes, things happen, but that doesn't constitute a story just because it's happening. There's zero substance, or things are rushed or nonsensical. No questions or motivations are ever explained or fleshed out. Swerve, being a babyface, is always going to be nonsensical until he atones or redeems himself for raiding a baby's crib. Until he does that, Him in a heroic or babyface role destroys any aspect of a story or narrative being told on a fundamental level. Period. A human nature level, guys. Good versus evil. There's no debating that. It's writing and character development. Development 101. That's just one example. Dirt sheet writers especially don't know how to actually write or structure stories, or else they do that and not be hack pseudo-journalists. Trust me, I get paid a fat salary to write actual stories professionally. I do. The amount of hacks who try and fail in the entertainment industry as well. Now I'm relating it to the other side of hacks who fail and end up becoming pseudo-activist pop culture news writers is astounding. We all know about them. Same applies to wrestling. I watch AEW every single week. Someone explain to everyone else 3 stories going into AEW All In and what they're actually about. Who's involved and what are their motives for their upcoming matches? So Dave Meltzer, someone Master Taker, which is a great name, tags me in this. I knew it that Meltzer and his sheep would stab Steiner in the back. So we talked about it earlier, but Meltzer goes, I would love someone to watch a week of WCW early 90s with the Steiners as champs, a week of New Japan pro wrestling in the 90s, heyday of the Steiners, a week of WWF in the 90s with Steiners as champs. Yeah, Dave, the difference is everyone in this you're naming looked like they could beat the out of you. And MMA wasn't on TV every day, readily available on cable and for the last 20 years. That's the difference. So now you got to come with some good in pro wrestling. That's the whole thing, dude. Dave, he just doesn't get it. He's behind the times, man. A week of New Japan in the 90s, a week with WWF in the 90s with Steiners as champs, and this past week of AEW, and actually count the number of stories and angles all 4 had. A bunch of people responded to these 2 I saw online. They're like, oh, Chris, can you name any? Do you know, were you a Steiners fan? Did they have good stories back then?
Yes, Steiners were in WCW and WWE. Which one? Take your pick. I mean, Steiners versus the Head Shrinkers, Steiners versus Doom, Steiners versus the Varsity Club, Steiners versus Harlem Heat, Steiners versus the Outsiders. They've had storylines.
Yeah, he just has no problem just talking out of his ass. And didn't he cover all this? This is the problem. Like, you know, he did it before internet. A lot of people used to they used to peddle fake martial arts and kung fu all the time too. Before the internet, dude. Now you can't do that. You know what I mean? Now you can't peddle that anymore, Chris Connor. You got to really know how to go, or your dojo is going to get called out. Another WCW legend, and WWE Hall of Famer, Booker T believes Tony Khan needs to hire someone to help him with creative. So can you dig that, sucker?